Bienvenidos a todos. This is the Paseo podcast. It is Thursday, January 7th, but really it doesn't really matter because it's a podcast. You're listening to this whenever, wherever you are. So just happy that you're spending this time with us and that you downloaded this episode. We have a very special guest today. We have the Alderwoman of the 33rd Ward here in Chicago, Rossana Rodríguez. Rossana, or Alderwoman Rodríguez, welcome to the Paseo podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. Call me Rossana. Call me Rossana.
Okay, perfect. Okay, everybody heard that. I have permission. All right.
Not everybody has permission,
Perfect. Okay, VIP status. Rossana, what should our audience know about you?
I grew up in Puerto Rico. I was born in San Juan. I was raised in Humacao. I am from the east coast of Puerto Rico. I was raised in a beautiful neighborhood called Mariana, which is a mountain right on the coast of Puerto Rico. My father is a community organizer, so I grew up around community organizing, and I learned very early in my life that in order to be able to have access to the resources that belong to us, we have to claim them together. So I learned that from my father and from all my neighbors in my community. And I think that has sort of given me the map to continue to move throughout life.
So you would really credit your family, your father, for like igniting this passion for organizing and public service.
Yeah, I would say so, and mostly it's just how you learn things work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was 6 years old, there was no water in my community. There was a drought, and we had a Navy base, a U.S. Navy base that was established in the town of Ceiba, which is very close to Humacao. So the water from our community, the water that would come from the river that serves our community, started being redirected and used mostly by the Navy base. And they would use it to like fill a pool that they had there. Like we didn't have water to like cover our basic needs, but they had a pool and they were like constantly filling it out. And so we would have rationing of our water, and we would have water maybe for an hour a day, and in that hour you needed to fill as many containers as you could find. To this day, there are still people in my community, some of my cousins, that keep plastic gallons of milk and like any plastic sort of container, just in case that we run out of water, right? And growing up like that and knowing that you live in an island that is very rich in that resource, it was mind-blowing that you would have to just exist without water. So my community organized, and my father was one of the leaders of the movement to try to get our water back. And it took a very long time. And I remember going to protest. I remember making my little signs. I remember getting in a school bus and going in front of the Waterworks Authority and picketing. And I think that was a really big lesson for me very early in life, right? Like we did not have access to a basic service, to a basic resource. And the government was willing to take that away from us. So we had to come together and we had to fight in order to get that back. And after that, I mean, living in a colony of the United States, everything was a fight. There was nothing that was readily available for you to take advantage of unless you were a wealthy person, and I was not. So yes, definitely the idea that you have to fight and you have to organize and you have to come together with people who have the same interests, right? In order to be able to achieve goals is at the core of who I am.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I think just thinking back 3 years ago to the Huracan, Maria, and Irma, I think that's one. I mean, people living in Puerto Rico, I mean, you growing up there, of course, understanding the fragility of the infrastructure that exists there, but just thinking about the magnifying glass that was put on it, especially for people in the diaspora, of just how fragile things are, from traveling from one pueblo to another, to access to clean water, food. It was heartbreaking to see. So it's interesting hearing that story because, even though a lot of time may have passed, things oddly still tend to remain the same. So it's very heartbreaking to see, but really cool to see that at a young age. You were already out there on buses, making signs, organizing.
That was a very long time ago,
Yeah,
right? I'm 42 years old now.
I mean
But
not that old, not that old, not that old. Not that. Give yourself some credit here.
no, I am. I love this 43. I mean, I have lived a lot,
Yeah.
and I am very proud of each one of those years and what I have learned. But I would say that my community, when when I started getting involved in the organizing in my community, I was about 6 years old. When I started to become aware of what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? That there was that there were things that were being organized in. Um, when Maria happened, I was actually a teacher at Pedro Albizu Campos when Maria passed. I was
I didn't
the
know that.
oh
Right?
no.
No, I didn't know that. Right there on Paseo Boricua.
Yes. So I was
Yeah.
an integrated arts teacher in Pedro Albizu Campos High School, and I remember the day that they said that it was inevitable that the hurricane was going to touch Puerto Rico, because I remember hearing it's a Category 5, and I lived in Puerto Rico until I was 30 years old. So I lived through Hugo and I lived through Georges, and those were Category 4 hurricanes, and they caused a lot of destruction. We were without power for in Hugo. I think we were without power for a month and a half, with or maybe 2 months, and with George's at least 1 month without power. Um, so I, knowing how fragile the infrastructure was, I knew that there was going to be, a lot of loss of life,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not wrong. But what I am going to say is that the reason why my community survived is because of 40 years of organizing that had preceded the arrival of that hurricane, right? Like
Yeah.
my community has a space where we celebrated the Festival de la Pana every year. I was 6 years old when that festival started, and it's still going. And there were the facilities, the kitchen, because we used to cook and we used to sell um, all sorts of dishes made out of pana, breadfruit. And because those facilities were there, and because people already were used to cooking for one another, and because there was space and there were networks, people came together right away after the hurricane and started cooking and started making sure that they took inventory of what were the needs of the community. The community has a relationship with the School of Social Work in the University of Puerto Rico, the Humacao campus, and those students came right away and started helping, doing assessments around the community. It was such a huge mobilization, but it happened because of the structures that had been created, the social structures that had been created for decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Communities that didn't have that suffered a lot because the government didn't show up, not
Yeah.
the local government or the federal government, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was the people on their own. So
Yeah.
community organizing have proven to be the only way to ensure the well-being of people permanently.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a great example is looking at the 2019 protests. Like, what an awesome masterclass in democracy, where you could see people organizing. And 1 million Boricuas there on the Capitol, just like, let's get this ass out of office. And that's just the people that could make it there. So, and I don't know that that would have been fully possible without the infrastructure built between organizers on La Isla. That actually, I want to transition. I want to transition a little bit to just the comparison between organizing and activism on La Isla compared to that of organizing and activism here in Chicago. So you have experience in both. Obviously, you're an alderwoman here. You're a member of the city council in Chicago. Have been a part of a lot of organizing on La Isla. In your experiences, I mean, how would you compare the two? Are there similarities, major differences?
I think there is a lot of difference everywhere. Like even in Puerto Rico, from one
Mm-hmm.
place to the other, you're gonna find lots of differences in terms of how people organize. I think that there's always been a little bit of a problem with all of the social ills that create all of the contradictions when you are trying to build movement. For example,
Mm-hmm.
sexism is very prevalent in Puerto Rican and Latin American culture. So encountering that and having to combat it and having to work through it, racism, like there's a lot of different things that get in the way of effective organizing. So I think that one of the places where I felt the most at home organizing was in the University of Puerto Rico, and over there I think was the place where I learned a lot more about how to take organizing beyond what I had learned in my community. My community was a really small cosmos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a space where people had grown up together and people knew each other really well, but that is not how it operates necessarily when you go out in the world, right? Like you
Yeah.
encounter a lot of people who are different and who have very different backgrounds, and you cannot make assumptions about anything. And I think that the University of Puerto Rico, I am so proud of having done my bachelor's there, because I feel like I learned so much about struggle there. Sometimes here, I've been a mentor for many young people here in Chicago, and I have seen many of my students go to private universities that I'm not very familiar with, like the idea of private education, and seeing like small liberal arts colleges that have all of these resources, and I would go on tours of these places and I would be like, oh my god, what is
Yeah.
this? Because
Mm-hmm.
the University of Puerto Rico is nothing like that. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have any of those resources. What I did have was an incredible infrastructure of organizers that taught me so much. Like I spent so much time on strike when I was in the University of Puerto Rico, because of issues inside of the University of Puerto Rico and issues that were not
Yeah.
necessarily about the University of Puerto Rico. When the strike of the Puerto Rico Telephone Company happened in 1998, I was a student at the University of Puerto Rico, and we shut down the university in solidarity with the workers of the Puerto Rico Telephone Company, and we marched to the offices that were close to in La Muñoz Rivera, close to the University of Puerto Rico, and we did not reopen the university until the strike was over, right?
Yeah.
And that was really important for us to stand against privatization of public services. That was really important, and that
I
was
feel
my
like. No, sorry. Go ahead.
no, that was my first encounter with neoliberalism, right? And I
Yeah.
learned that in the University of Puerto Rico, and I learned it in practice. Like I
Mm-hmm.
learned what that meant in practice: the privatization of a service that belongs to the people, that works perfectly fine, that is giving the people revenue, right? It's giving the government revenue that can be used for services, and
Mm-hmm.
still there was the free market that was coming in and saying, no, we can make a profit out of this, so let's just sell it, like just
Yeah.
sell it. And they won. They, like, Pedro Rosselló ended up selling the Puerto Rico Telephone Company, and from there lots of companies enter Puerto Rico, and it destroyed a public institution that was so productive and that had really good jobs and benefits for its workers. And
Yeah.
but I learned about neoliberalism there, right? I
Yeah.
learned about how to organize and how to do strike defense, and it was the amount of learning that I feel that I got from going to the University of Puerto Rico is something that can't even be measured.
I didn't mean to cut you off there briefly, but I was going to say that it always feels like the University of that. It's like every time I hear about a protest happening in Puerto Rico, like I always feel like it's always like the dopest people like in those movements are like somehow it's like centered around the university. It's like there's just something really, it seems, I mean, I've never been there, but it seems like there's just something really magical happening in the relationships that are built. It's really interesting to see. I did want to touch on like your transition from being in Puerto Rico to being in Chicago. I mean, of all places, like I look at La Isla as paradise. Why come to? I mean, I love Chicago too. Don't get me wrong, but of all places to go to, why move from Puerto Rico to Chicago?
I came to Chicago for work. I am my background is in theater. I am a theater artist and a theater educator. And I was working. I was a teacher in Puerto Rico at the time, and then Law 7. All of my history is political.
Yeah.
Just for everybody to know. I'm also a singer songwriter, so I've always been surrounded by art, and I have
Hmm.
always created art and lived in that space. But also, I have always been very political and
Yeah.
very oriented to organizing. So I was a teacher in the town of Añasco in the west side of the island. I was a drama teacher there in a middle school, and uh, and that's when Law 7 was passed by Governor Fortuño.
Mm.
When Law 7 was passed, that was a set of austerity laws that were cutting budgets in essentially every department. It was devastating. There was about 20,000 government employees that were laid off during when Law 7 was passed as a result of it, and a big part of it was cuts in education. When the cuts in education came, one of the things that it did was that it removed the cap on the amount of students that you could have in your classroom. And at this point, I was already stretched out. I was buying all of my materials with my own money, everything. Like when I got my job, I didn't get even a piece of chalk to
Mm.
write. And I
Awful.
was a drama teacher, right? Like I needed materials, I needed things. And I bought all of the costumes, makeup, everything. I would go to the thrift store. I would just, and I was making $1,500 a month, right? So I was, with that salary, I was having to buy my own stuff. But then when you tell me,
Wow.
okay, so now we're gonna remove the cap on the amount of students, now I can't even teach because
Right.
you're telling me that you actually don't care about education. You just want me to contain a bunch of kids in a space
Hmm.
until it's time to release them to their parents. And Añasco is one of the towns with the highest incidence of mental illness and poverty.
Mm.
So I was dealing with a reality that was really, really, really stressful. I was there for a year and a half. I was starting to feel it. Like when they approved Law 7, I was like, you can't, this is not sustainable. So I started looking for jobs. But as I said before, 20,000 people were laid off from the government. All of these people were looking for a job at the same time. People had to
Hmm.
leave. There was a really big exodus of people that left Puerto Rico after Law 7 was passed because there was no jobs in the island, in the archipelago.
Hmm.
So I ended up looking for jobs outside of Puerto Rico, and I didn't want to leave. I did not want to leave Puerto Rico at all. I love living there. I lived there for 30 years. Like my friends are there, my family is there. I love the life that I had there. But I had to go. I felt like I was actually kicked out. I felt like I was evicted from my own country because I had student loans to pay, I had bills to pay, and I just
Yeah.
couldn't stay. So I found a job with Albany Park Theater Project, which is a youth theater company based here in my neighborhood in Albany Park. And I applied on the last day because I didn't really want to leave. So on the day of the deadline, I was like, you know what, I'm going to apply just to see what
Go for
happens.
it.
And
Yeah.
they called me like immediately. I guess I was like some sort of like, I don't know, unicorn or something, because I think everybody that was applying was white, like most
I
of the
believe
theater
it.
art
Yeah.
it, that so so they called me almost immediately. I traveled to Chicago to do an interview. I think maybe a couple of days later, they called me and offered me the position, and I quit my job and I was here in about a month, and I stayed. And I stayed here. At the beginning, I was like, but my dad was like really upset that I was leaving. And
Mm.
he's always been incredibly supportive of me and everything I do. But I
Yeah.
think that he was feeling it, right? Because he,
Yeah.
he lived in New York for a while, and he was like, why are you gonna go? And I'm like, well, I don't know what else to do, but
Hmm.
I'll go for a year or two and I'll come back. And I remember my father saying, that's not how it works.
Hmm.
And he was right.
Yeah.
He was absolutely right.
Yeah, we actually, before we started recording, I had mentioned to you that I interviewed someone from the London diaspora, Naomi Bonafu. I was talking to her, and she talked about her own migration story from La Isla, and had mentioned that she was going to go for a few years and see what London had to offer. And 12 years later, she's still there. She has a kid, like she has roots now. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot easier said than done. You mentioned a lot of good
I mean,
things. Oh.
I'm fortunate. There's a lot of people, like there's a lot of Puerto Ricans here in Chicago, right?
Hmm.
Like I went to for my master's degree. I did it in England. I was in Manchester, and I mean
Dope.
there were very few Puerto Ricans. So
Yeah.
I feel fortunate that I have access to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I asked Naomi, how many Boricuas are there in London? Like, how do you all connect? She's like, there's six of us, so it's super easy to do that compared to over 200,000 here in Chicago. But you said a lot of good things, so I do want to jump around to like Chicago public schools here and that system. I mean, privatization. You're working theater, so I'm just gonna like jump around a little bit here. First, just some affirmation. Can definitely see your love of theater. Fun story. I was reading this WBEZ article, and it was an old article. I was like trying to like come up with stuff to ask you. Obviously, a lot has happened since we first talked to get you on the show, so I don't want to like dive too deep into this. But I thought it was like so awesome to see you as an alderwoman, as busy as you are, coming to Chicago. I'm reading this article, and it's about the theater troupe from San Juan, no, y no había luz, I think they're
Oh
called.
yeah.
So I'm like looking through this article, and I'm like, I don't know what this has to do with Rossana. So I'm going down, and I see this picture of you all dressed up in the costumes, like super excited. You're glowing, reading this book. Like, and this book is huge. We'll put the article in the show notes. But I was just like, wow, like what a cool thing to see. Like, I've never seen a picture like that of anybody in the city council that is like just so confident in themselves that they're fine dressing up in costume and putting on a show for people. I thought it was the coolest thing. So I think your love for theater definitely shines through. I did also well, actually, I don't know. I mean, you were you a part of that troupe, or were they just in town and you guys had a
No, but
connection?
you know,
And
those are like my really, really good friends. We went to college together. Like we were in the UP in the
there we
Universidad
go.
de Puerto
Yeah.
Rico,
Okay.
and we were a part of the traveling theater of Rosa Luisa Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of theater of the oppressed together. We traveled to Ecuador together like twice. We are very I'm very good friends with them, and we have done a lot of work together over the years. So those people are my family. So when they came and they were gonna do that, they were like, can you do it with us?" And the funny thing is that I ended up bringing one of my girls from the theater company to
Fantastic.
also play a role on that particular show. So it was actually really, really cool.
That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Were you elected as an alderwoman at that time, or was this before that? Because there was no date on the
It was before.
article.
It was right. It was after Maria.
Okay.
So I don't think I have been elected yet. No,
Got you.
I
Okay.
was like,
Speaking of like your time before becoming an alderwoman, you mentioned teaching at Pedro Albizu Campos, which is a high school located in Paseo Boricua. For people that are unaware, a lot of good work is done there. Wanted to focus on specifically your time on Paseo Boricua because I know you are the founder of an organization called Boricua Resistance. And we have two Puerto Rican cultural centers here in the city. We also have the Puerto Rican Agenda. So, like we mentioned earlier, 200,000 plus Boricuas in this city. Of course, there's going to be people starting their own organizations on what they feel needs to be at the forefront and organizing on behalf of the diaspora, on behalf of La Isla. So, just wanted to get some insight from you. With things like the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, Puerto Rican Agenda, other Boricua groups, why did you feel Boricua Resistance needed to be founded, and what need did you feel it was filling? Is that a loaded question?
it might be. I
Yeah.
don't know. I have a problem answering it though. um. So to be perfectly honest, when I came here from Chicago at the very beginning, I feel like I tried to start organizing within the Puerto Rican community here. but it was really hard. I felt like I felt like a lot of decisions were already made, or whenever there was an issue, like decisions were like um, made even before a
Mm-hmm.
meeting would have happened, and then you would be there and told what to do. And I don't roll like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I I have
Yeah.
organized enough in my life to know what democratic processes are, and to know that I am a really smart person. And as I said before, there's a lot of sexism in our culture in general. So to me, it was really important to be able to develop organization culture where I felt like I was being taken seriously. And but beyond that, the main call, what founded Chicago Boricua resistance was Promesa.
Mm.
When Promesa was being discussed at the very early stages of that discussion, when we started seeing the proposal, even before it passed, before it went into deliberation, we started looking at Promesa, and we were very alarmed, and we were not seeing anybody else that was like sounding the alarm. This is bad. And
Mm-hmm.
we thought that it was really important to start educating and sharing the information. This is what's going to happen if this is passed. And we really wanted to mobilize around it. So we started hosting some events, and going around and just telling people what was going on. And organically, some people, mostly people who were raised in Puerto Rico, which was really
Mm.
interesting to me.
Yeah.
Mostly people who had experience the experience of being born and raised in Puerto Rico, and then coming here sort of later in life, started sort of coming around with the understanding, oh, I know exactly what is happening and how this is going to impact the people of Puerto Rico, right? So in that process, we ended up like learning a lot about Promesa, and doing a lot of campaigning around it. Um, but yeah, I would say that I didn't feel particularly welcome at the
Mm.
beginning when I first got here in,
Mm-hmm.
I think this was 2009.
Yeah.
Later on, like I started just, inhabiting the space, like just showing up and inhabiting the space more. And I just sort of made my own space
Mm-hmm.
in, in the community.
Yeah.
And I have really good relationships with like everybody at Paseo. But to me, the organizing, the political organizing space was something that was important to create a culture where people like me felt valued and welcome. And to talk about things in a political way that is very left, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
am a socialist,
Yeah.
and I don't shy away from saying that I am a socialist, and I am at odds a lot of times with the Democrats, a lot of times,
Yep.
and I am never scared to say that, and I am never going to be scared of saying that, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, I am also going to show up whenever my people need me, and whenever Puerto Rico needs whatever Puerto Rico needs, and I am in very close communication with Puerto Rico all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
so I
Yeah.
guess that's the story. You can
Yeah.
edit that.
No, I think you were dropping some truth bombs there. I think there's a lot to be said about hospitality and giving everybody a seat at the table, and that's not something that's always prevalent, especially for people that call a new place home. How do we welcome the stranger? How do we welcome people that are part of our own culture? That's something that I remember seeing. I mean, even when I entered into the professional world with in a lot of groups that I felt like I'd be simpatico with, like, okay, we're all gonna vibe and we're gonna be on the same page and we're all gonna have this like, collaborative love fest and like really like we're snapping our fingers and we're gonna like put our conversations into action. And I think a lot of times well, at least what I experienced was, I'd present an idea and was told something like, well, this is the way we've always done it, or well, we're actually going to move in this direction, and you almost feel like you're talking to a brick wall. Does it really matter if you're present there? Are you just a body that exists for someone to point you in the direction and you follow those orders? So I think I think that comes from a very real place. Speaking of feeling a need, you did mention you were a socialist, one of 6, I believe, in the Chicago City Council that are DSA, or is it 5 now?
Who knows?
Okay. TBD. So, a substantial amount. We started with a friend of the show, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who's been on, and he talked about why he aligns with DSA. I'd love to hear why you decided to run for alderperson. You mentioned privatization. I think we've seen that a lot in Chicago with things like our parking meters. But that is something that we sold. We sold the rights off to that and lost out on billions of dollars.
Mhm.
So just questioning, what would happen if there was a socialist running things and coming into running government policy with that mindset. So I very much align with DSA. Not afraid to say that either. I love it when you call out Democrats because I think a lot of times it's just lip service. A lot of times I think they try to play identity politics as a way to give themselves a badge of honor to say, like, look, we're on the right side of justice, but don't actually enact that in the policy they present. But enough about my views. Why did you decide to run as a alderwoman? This was in May 2018. You challenged incumbent Deb Mell, just for everybody listening.
Yes. Okay, so I'll tell you first why I ran for office and then why I ran as a socialist.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I asked you another loaded question. I jump around way too much. So yeah,
I
no,
know
please.
it's cool, it's cool.
Yeah.
And I can actually address both of those things probably
Okay.
like very, very closely. So I was asked to run by some of the people that I have organized with. In 2015, there was a teacher in my community who ran for office. As I said before, I was a theater director and mentor for a youth theater company in my community. The youth theater company was children of the neighborhood, mostly Latino kids in the neighborhood, and many of them went to the neighborhood school. So Tim Megan was a teacher at that point at Roosevelt High School, which is my only high school here in the 33rd ward. And he was a history teacher, and he was a very progressive history teacher. And he ran on a platform that was, alderman for the 99%, and he was very adamant in funding public schools, in making sure that we work against privatization. It was a really progressive platform, and I decided to support him. And a lot of my kids loved him because he was his teacher. So it was like, I ended up working in his campaign, and we devoted a lot of time trying to get him elected. And we lost, but it was like 17 votes away from a runoff, which was crazy
Wow.
because I have never organized at an electoral level ever
Mm-hmm.
in my life. To me, elections were like this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have always organized politically around campaigns, but electorally, never. So we didn't know what we were doing. Well, I'm not going to say we didn't know what we were doing. We have never done it before. We were learning how to do electoral work
Mm-hmm.
on our own, essentially. We didn't have any money, but somehow we ended up getting to 17 votes away from a runoff. So
Sounds familiar.
we decided to found an organization called 33rd Ward Working Families, and we organized for 4 years in the community around immigration, around education, and around housing, all of those issues. And we would knock on doors and try to put things on, like issues on ballots, like rent control, for example. That's a good example of the kind of campaign that we were running. And we would knock on doors and talk to people about rent control and why it's important that we are able to have rent control, or lifting the ban. Like
Mm-hmm.
we put the issue of the moratorium on charter schools on the ballot as well. And we would just go and have conversations with people and organize. And then in terms of immigration, we were doing a lot of immigration support. We had the Albany Park Defense Network in the community, so we were working very closely with them, and we would do a lot of solidarity or actions and mutual aid around immigration. We would go with people that had cases and, have a phone tree and be like, somebody has a hearing, everybody needs to show up, and people will show up even if you didn't know who this person was. Like, you just need to show up because we need to protect our neighbors, right?
Yeah.
So and try to find legal aid for people that had immigration cases. So doing that work, we were able to build a base, and we ended up challenging again. I was asked to run because I had developed very strong roots in the community. I had relationships with families. I am an Afro Latina living in this community. I speak Spanish. I can definitely relate to a lot of the issues that immigrants have, even though I have a U.S. citizenship. The cultural immigration is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up saying yes. I said no, I don't know how many times, like 25 times, like people kept saying, because one person told me, and then I think that person started telling other people, like, you
Yeah.
should
We
run.
got to get
And then people
together.
just kept coming and said,
Yeah.
like, you should run. And I'm like, why is everybody telling me that I need to run? You run.
Nothing like peer pressure.
But then eventually I realized that if I wanted a woman of color,
Yeah.
a radical woman of color to be on that seat, I was going to have to do it myself because there was nobody else. So I ended up saying yes, and it was the hardest thing. Like, besides migrating from Puerto Rico, and having a baby, this is the hardest thing that I have ever done in my life. It is it is so hard.
Yeah. So would
Particularly,
you say it's everything you expected being an older person?
oh, I had no idea
Hmm.
what I no, I had no idea how comprehensive this job is. Like, most elected officials are lawmakers, and that's what they are, and that's it. But aldermen are lawmakers and also have a ward to tend to. So you are dealing with potholes and garbage cans at the same time that you're trying to create treatment, not trauma, like ordinance, right? And so you're trying to understand law, you're trying to navigate community organizations and their issues. It's a lot. It is a really big job. um so I ended up saying yes because I thought that it would be really important to for people like us who are fighting for justice and who are fighting for a more equal, a world with more equity, right? To have institutional power, because we usually don't have that, right? Like, our
Yeah.
power is the power of the people, and that's great, and we can achieve a lot by exercising pressure on elected officials. But what if we get institutional power for ourselves and bring these ideas and push for them unapologetically in the places where there's power, and then throw some of that power out the window for people to access it, right? And I think that was the purpose, and I think that we are fulfilling that promise. And I'm really proud of that. And it's also the reason why I ran as a socialist as well. And I didn't want to shy away from that. I feel like I have been a socialist. I grew up among people who call themselves socialists, and those were the people that were consistently fighting for the benefit of the many. Those were the people, and that's what I grew up around. And that's what I learned.
Yeah.
So to me, socialist politics is about making sure that everybody is okay. And the way that we do that is making sure that the government is providing the services and resources that people need to be okay. And in order to do that, we need to fund those, right? And in order to fund that, we need to tax the rich.
Yep.
So
And enough of these regressive tax measurements. Like, why? I mean, I know you came out against the property tax or the city budget that was put forward by the mayor, because we're looking at an increase in property taxes every year. I mean, who does that? A rich person, that's pennies to them. But for working class people, working poor, and that could carry dire consequences
in a pandemic,
in a
when so
pandemic.
many people have lost their jobs,
Right.
or the hours have been cut,
Right.
like, yeah, and it is, there's always this resistance to talk about taxing the rich, and it is incredible what people that are wealthy get away with while other people suffer so much, and we
Right.
shouldn't live in a world that is like that. So
Yeah.
it was important to me to make sure that was the message that we were putting out there. And I mean, I didn't know if we were going to win. We were running to win,
Hmm.
but we didn't know that we were going to win.
Yeah.
um but we did, and now this is the message that we're bringing forward.
No, for sure. Oh, and for people that are unaware, I mean, you basically through your campaign toppled a dynasty here in Chicago. You challenged incumbent Deb Mell, whose family had control over that ward for about 44 years, if not more.
Hmm.
So what a great example to show, like, if people see something that they don't like, or they see that a need is not being filled, and then everybody has the capability. I mean, there's other things that exist in running and collecting petitions that exist in our political system, but the pathway is there. So it was really cool to see you actually come out on the winning side of that campaign. Could you break down exactly what is the crisis assistance helping out on our streets? Helping out on the streets. Crisis assistance helping out on the streets. What's the what? How does that? What is that
The
framework?
idea is that you don't need to send police to every crisis that there is, but police is the only tool that we have to respond at the moment. So crisis mobile units would go, and these are vehicles that are equipped with a mental health care professional and an EMT, and they would go and address any situation that is non-violent, non-life threatening, that is associated to mental health or minor things. There are several programs that now are even coming out for shoplifting, and they are considering shoplifting something that, in cases in which it's not a robbery, right? Like there's no weapon. Those are crimes of survival.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, we shouldn't be processing people through the criminal justice system when people are just trying to survive. So the idea is that you actually use the right tools to address the right the situations, right? And so Cahoots focuses on using mental health care professionals and EMTs to go around town on a vehicle and addressing those. And it's a 24-hour response, and it's what we're trying to do from Chicago, but using the mental health clinics.
Mm. Well, speaking of
Which
oh,
Cahoots uses Whitebird Clinic, which is a community mental health clinic, which is one of the reasons why we said, okay, Chicago already has a public mental health care system. We still have 5 of our mental health clinics open after Daly and Ram closed all the rest. We used to have 19. We're down to 5.
mm,
We still can use those, right? And we can expand the services and make mental health services more accessible to communities, if you are being able to go to those communities and find the people who need the most help right there, right on the
mm-hmm.
streets. So we're very committed to this idea. We're going to continue to push for it. And the idea was, in this particular case, the idea was to take money from the police department and reallocate it so that we could have a citywide crisis response system that is non-law enforcement based.
Speaking of prosecuting people, we're recording this on January 7th. Yesterday, January 6th, will go down in infamy as one of the most disgusting moments in our country's history. Now, I know
Oh,
this.
Three Kings Day, man. Like, why did
I
they
know.
have to put that on Three Kings Day?
I hear you. I mean, that definitely was not a gift anybody wanted to see or get. I know we have to go in a little bit, and I know we try to focus on highlighting Puerto Rican stories here, and you are elected official at the local level, so it's not like you have the authority at the federal level to enact any change. So I don't want to put too much on your shoulders with this question, But what were some of your thoughts yesterday about that coup attempt, that insurrection, especially considering what we saw here in Chicago and around the United States, and how protesters were treated during that period of civil unrest? I mean, I think we're still in a period of civil unrest, but looking at the differences in how authorities, how politicians, how media reacted to what was happening yesterday compared to how people were reacting to the protests that erupted out of the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many other people of color.
Puerto Ricans have known who Donald Trump is for a very long time, and we will
Mm-hmm.
never forget the response of Donald Trump to Hurricane Maria. We will never forget how Puerto Ricans were treated. We know that Donald Trump came in a populist platform that was trying to gain support from people who are racist. Um, and bank on that and capitalize on that hate and make it even harder and stronger. And that's what he did his whole presidency. And we all said it. And
Mm-hmm.
we said that he was a threat and that he was instigating fascism. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday. We saw fascist people who were trying to disrupt a democratic process violently attack the House of the People, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am living in a very crazy, like, sort of state where you sort of like are not surprised, but you're still like incredibly outraged, right? Like,
Right.
we knew that this could happen. He had been telling his people to go to DC on that day for a long time. Everybody knew that they were going to show up. We saw what happened when with Kyle Rittenhouse, for example. There's no reason why there shouldn't have been preparation in order to meet these people, just like they did with Black Lives Matter protests all around the nation. We
Mm-hmm.
saw what happened in Chicago with bridges lifted and the streets and sands vehicles blocking every exit of the highway into the center of they protected the center of Chicago right away.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see that same deployment of resources for DC, and it feels like they were allowed in, and that is
Yeah.
really scary. That's a really scary thing to think about, that these people
Mm-hmm.
enacted as a pseudo coup, and they haven't even gotten a slap in the wrist. People
Right.
were chilling in their hotel like nothing. I just
Mm-hmm.
went and stormed into the Capitol building, and now I'm here in the lobby of this hotel sipping my drink, and
Right.
everything is fine.
And
And
doing
of
media
course,
interviews. And doing
yeah,
media interviews as well.
like nothing. And then the FBI is out here saying that they're trying to like get information. What?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's all out there, right?
Right.
So yes, it definitely is the result of white supremacy. It's white supremacy in action. I'm not even gonna
Mm-hmm.
call it white privilege. This is
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy,
Yeah.
and I think that it's going to be. I know that I am an elected, at a very local level, but we definitely want to be um, demanding from our elected officials at higher levels. First of all, the impeachment of Donald Trump. It needs to happen. He needs to go. And I think that it wouldn't be okay for him to leave office as if this did not happen,
Mm-hmm.
because we have seen what he has done in the past, and
Yeah.
and I think that we need to continue to fight against fascism, and one of the ways in which we do that is making sure that people have the resources that they need to survive, and to thrive, because when there is scarcity and when people are not treated like humans, this is what's going to happen as well. I am in no way excusing, of course, what happened, and it's deeply racist, and these people are fascists. But I do believe that there is a lot of work to do in order for us to be able to make conditions better for everybody, and that can help curb some of what is happening. There is a racism that you can't deny, that is
Yeah.
found, that in which this country was founded. But I do think that there's a lot of work to do in both ends.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, you look at some of the pictures and videos online. I mean, I was just glued to my screen to my Twitter feed. You saw how the National Guard was ready when the BLM protests were happening, compared to maybe a handful of Capitol Police around. I saw videos of Capitol Police opening the gates, allowing people that were there that were trying to break into the Capitol. I saw Capitol Police taking photos with people that were like you said, in a pseudo coup. And I mean, I was so frustrated watching this, Rossana, because you see how it's talked about in the media, and it took forever for anybody to say domestic terrorism, for anybody to say that, even rioters. It was like protesters. The protesters are doing this. They're breaking the windows. They're on the House floor.
There were explosives.
Yeah, there's pipe bombs. I mean, 4 people died.
No, it is. I was actually watching a clip from Fox News, and and they were like, well, this has been mostly peaceful. If you take away the fact that they, broke into the Capitol, there was not real damage, and except for the woman who died. And I'm like, are you listening to yourself?
Right.
What?
Right.
No, I think it's gonna be really important for us to not buy into the democracy prevailed narrative, and that, okay, we, everything is going to be okay. Biden is here. The Democrats are taking over. I don't think that we can trust that is the case. I think that the Democrats, because of the space in which we're in right now, I mean, Donald Trump got a lot of votes, so definitely these people are out there, right? Yeah. And they're not going away, and the Democratic Party is going to continue to move right whenever it feels like that's where it needs to go in order to remain in power, right? And that's dangerous, and we need to be organized. Yeah. We have seen, they are not playing around. They told us, they have told us multiple times.
Years.
They have told us so many times that they are not playing around. So it is very important that we can protect each other, that we have the networks and the structures in order to be able to protect one another, to defend ourselves, and to make sure that we are advocating for the policies that are going to benefit the vast majority of people.
Okay, Rossana, rapid fire questions from our audience so they don't rip my head off. I have to share these. I have to be accountable. Super quick ones though. Favorite Puerto Rican restaurant to eat in Chicago?
Oh wow, you're gonna get me in trouble. I have Casa Yari, which is half, and La Bruquena.
La Bruquena, okay. Casa Yari is great.
Ibaritos is so good too. You're like.
I know, that's a tough one. Okay, next question. Why do you change your Twitter profile picture so much?
Are you? Somebody's looking at me. Somebody's watching me. I don't know, because I can.
Okay, that's great. Okay, what are you reading, watching, obsessed with right now? Ideally something connected to Puerto Rican culture, but not necessary. Puerto Ricans can have interest outside of La Isla and Puerto Rican culture, but what's something you're obsessed with?
I just got this. I just got the Clemente, The Passion and Grace of Baseball's Last Hero. So this is my new companion.
Is that new? Is that a new book?
It's not. I think it's from 2017, maybe 2018. I'm really excited about it, and I just started reading it. So yes, I am obsessed with that. I just finished watching Good Lord Bird, and I loved it so much. It's the John Brown series, and Small Axe. I think I'm gonna say that it's on Prime. The first one is called Mangrove. You need to watch it. It's so good.
I'm writing this down.
So whoever hasn't watched Small Axe yet, is a set of several movies. Oh my God, it's so beautifully shot. It's beautiful. Make sure that you check it out.
Writing it down, and I'm gonna get that Clemente book too. I'm gonna order that. Okay, so last question. How can people keep up with you? Social media, website, whether that's political accounts, government accounts, how can people keep up with you?
So on Twitter, I am Rossana433. I'm going to keep changing my picture now, no more than I was, because I know somebody's watching me. And then on Facebook, if for my official page is 33rd Ward Alderman Rossana Rodríguez Sanchez, and Rossana Rodriguez for my political Facebook account. And then you can go to Rossana for 33, and that's our website, and you can see what we're up to there. 33rd ward.org is our website for the ward, and you can see everything that we're up to there at the official level too. I try to stay, out there as much as I can. So anything if you go to our Aldermanic Facebook page, you can see our live there. I have a live that I do usually every week, and you can see a lot of the discussions that we have been having around a lot of different issues.
Awesome. Alderwoman of the 33rd Ward, Rossana Rodríguez Sanchez, thank you so much for being on the Paseo podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Hasta luego.